When I interviewed Richard Bach, he said something that has always stayed with me, which is that you're not looking for an editor or a publisher. You're looking for a member of your intellectual family, a member of your intellectual family. I thought that was really interesting. And of course, it was true for him. The editor who found and who acquired Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which would go on to sell, I think, 44 million copies. She was not just an editor, but she was also a pilot. How many women pilot editors were there in 1970? I'll bet one. And well, they found each other. And I thought of this when I thought of William Kennedy. William Kennedy, the author William Kennedy. I was a fan of his work in the 80s when I discovered him. He wrote a book called Ironweed that won the Pulitzer Prize, and I read that and loved it. And then I read that after that, I read a book called Legs, which was about a gangster named Legs Diamond. It was told from the point of view of Legs Diamond's lawyer. And it was very, just like Ironweed, it was very lyrical it was a very strong story. That combination of lyricism and a strong story, I quite liked it. And I went on to read another book called Quinn's Book, and I was a bit of a fan. So much so that I even considered briefly at that time, because I was young when I first discovered his work, going and studying with him in Albany, where he taught. It didn't happen, but I was that intrigued by what he was doing. And years later, I picked up a book when I moved to Seattle called Billy Bathgate, and it was by E.L. Doctorow. And E.L. Doctorow is probably best known for his book Ragtime, known for a lot of stuff. He's also famous for the quote about the headlights on writing a novel is like driving across country by the headlights on your car, and you can only see what's in front of you. I think that's an E.L. Doctorow quote. But he's also known for his novels. And I read Billy Bathgate, which was also about a gangster, although this one was told from the point of view of a boy who worked for him. And it was lyrical and story driven, and it reminded me of Legs. I was like, oh, this feels a lot like Legs, same sort of thing. That's interesting. Okay, a couple years go by, and I'm still a fan of William Kennedy, and I'm watching PBS, and there's a documentary about him. And there he is driving around Albany, showing all the different sites, because all his books take place in Albany. And they interviewed other writers and other luminaries about him, including like Frank McCourt, who wrote Angela's Ashes and talked about how much he loved his work. And then who do I see but E.L. Doctorow? And E.L. Doctorow says, well, in a former life, I was an editor, and a book came across my desk, The Ink Truck, and a little alarm went off in my head. The Ink Truck. Now, that was Kennedy's first novel. I didn't read it, but I knew it was his first book. Doctorow goes on to say, I was an editor, and a book came across my desk, The Ink Truck, and I read it, and I thought, I'd like to publish this book. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Because the books that Doctorow write are very much like the books that William Kennedy write. And I don't mean that Doctorow imitated him. I don't think he did at all. I think that's just how he wrote. You see, they were members of the same intellectual family. William Kennedy couldn't have found a better person to acquire his first novel, whether Doctorow knew what he was become himself or not. They were a part of the same intellectual family. I think it's really important to remember this as we writers go out, because there is a tendency to feel isolated, not just alone. And I've addressed the loneliness aspect, because when you're really writing, you don't feel lonely, but you can start to feel isolated, I think, if you want to express yourself uniquely, which you do. We all do. We all want to express our unique view of the world, and this is our job. But you can start believing, perhaps the ego gets involved, but you might start believing you're the only one who's really doing what you're doing and could really only ever understand and appreciate what you're doing. And this will leave you feeling isolated, like you're kind of a freak, a one of a kind, in the worst sense of the word. But it's not true. And so you've got to hold in your heart room for the other members of your intellectual family, and they're out there. But you'll only find them if you trust that they are. You have to go looking for them. You can't believe they don't exist, or you will not find them. You will not find what you don't think exists. Just like as you're writing and you want the next word, but you don't know what it is. If you start thinking it'll never come and I can't do it and it won't come, the word doesn't come. You have to believe the word, the idea, the sentence will come, even though it hasn't yet. You have to believe in what hasn't come yet, even though you can't see it. Yeah. So in the same way, you have to believe in the other members of your intellectual family who will first buy your book or will first acquire your book if you publish traditionally, and then eventually will buy and read and share your book. They're out there. They're out there doing just what you're doing. Yes, they are. They're looking around, searching around for other members of their intellectual family so that we can all work together and dream the life we want to live together. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Thanks for tuning in. As always, if you don't want to miss a dose of this inspiration, hit subscribe. And if you like it, say so. I love to hear from you. I do. I love to hear from, I like to hear in your stories about your trials and tribulations, your successes and your near misses, even. I think they're all interesting. So share those with me. So until next time, this is Bill Kenower. Stay fearless.